guys, welcome back to another episode of the Hammer and Chisel Performance Podcast. I'm your host, John Heck. As always, before we get rolling here, I just want to give a quick shout out to the sponsors of the podcast, Troponin Supplements. As always, keep me decked out in the gear. And then before every episode, I take a dose of my favorite product of theirs, ATP. It's an effervescent tablet. You drop it in your water like an Alka-Seltzer. It tastes great. 300 milligrams of caffeine and has a powerful nootropic ingredient, and it just gives me a good uplifting boost in mood and energy and focus, keeps my memory sharp, and it really helps when I'm having in-depth conversations on the podcast like I am with my guest today. So guys, go to the Troponin Supplements website. Check out all their products. They're all fantastic. Use code HECK for a discount. And anyway, without further ado, getting into this episode. So guys, I put up an Instagram post the other day just asking for some requests from you guys on guests that you guys wanted to see. And today's guest is one that was widely requested, widely recommended. And as soon as I saw this guy's name put out there, I was like, I can't believe I didn't ask him to come on earlier. So most of you know this guy. I've got Matt Wenning on. And if you don't know who Matt Wenning is, he has been an absolutely elite powerlifter over the course of many years with an extensive powerlifting career. And in my opinion, and the opinion of many others, he's just one of the best and most knowledgeable voices out there when it comes to all things training. So anyway, Matt, appreciate you coming on, man.
Not a problem, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, Matt, you've been very patient. You guys in the audience won't have seen this, but this is actually the third take of trying to get this intro down. We had some connection issues. Matt's living out in the boonies there in the country. So Matt, appreciate your patience, man.
Yeah, man, not a problem. It's always fun to get out and talk to guys like you.
Yeah, well, before we started recording, you and I were just talking about the fact that before you jumped on, you had just finished up reading some of your Soviet training manuals, and you were talking about just the way that you value continued education, continuing to read. And I thought you had a great nugget of wisdom. If you don't mind just dropping that for my audience.
Yeah, I try to read twice as much as I train. So I train 4 days a week. Try to keep my training in around an hour to keep it, I figure, hormonally balanced. And it's what I found over the last 30 plus years that's allowed me to constantly recover. So I try to increase workout density more than increase workout time. And so that reduces rest periods and make sure that I'm on the ball. When I'm training, I'm actually training. I'm not on my phone. I'm not dicking around. I'm really pushing for whatever I'm trying to accomplish that day. And so I made a deal with myself about, that's been a long time now, maybe 15 or 20, probably closer to 20 years, that I was going to start reading as much as I trained times two. And so when I started to do that, it started to open my mind up to a lot of the things that translated into my training, my winning warm-ups, how many times I should do max effort work in a month, how many speed reps I should get in a month, what I should be doing to train my ligaments and tendons, what I should be doing to train for muscle hypertrophy, what I should be focusing on in development, when people want to get more flexible or more mobile. All of these parameters and things I have found are more in depth and far more superior in books than the internet. I don't really read anything on the internet anymore. And it's not because I don't think that there's good information out there. I learned from an old school mentality that everything that we had in class was books. And so I was raised that way in school. And so when I open a book in my master's program or my undergraduate programs, or even in some of my classes that I took for my honorary doctorate, everything was book level, and it helped me tremendously. So when I open up a book, my mentality is education and absorption. And I find that there's just so much poor information as well on the internet that it's hard to sift through. And I think it makes it complex for novices, intermediates, and sometimes even advanced people to know what's good and what's bullshit.
Yeah, exactly. I've always said, I think the status of the internet, it's a good thing and a bad thing in many ways. It's good in the sense that, okay, there's more access to information than ever. But on the flip side of that, there's just too much access to shitty information, right? Mm-hmm. And you don't know which voices to listen to. I mean, to your point, there's some very knowledgeable sources of information out there. But for every one knowledgeable voice, there's going to be, 10 influencers who are just peddling some bullshit. And I think there's something to just reading a hardback book as opposed to, you're scrolling through Instagram and it's just
Yeah.
catering to this just short attention span that's so ingrained in humans now through electronics. Whereas when you sit down, actual book in hand, there has to be just, and I couldn't give you the true science behind this, but I know that there's just something different to actually
Mhm.
retaining and comprehending and locking in on the
Mhm.
information with a hardback book.
Yeah, and I think that's where you really find a lot of the. I don't think there's a replacement right now for guys that were my professors, like Dr. William Kramer, Dr. Newton, Dr. Kwan, Dr. Trappy, all the guys that made Ball State the superior exercise science school that it was when I was there. And a lot of that's because they had to learn from books, in my personal opinion.
Right? No,
So
I couldn't agree more.
that's a huge factor.
Yeah, and something I appreciate about you, and a reason I wanted to have you on is you've kind of got it all. You have the in the trenches experience. You're battle tested as a competitor, as a
Yep.
coach on the floor, but then you have the actual educational academic background to support all of your beliefs and your philosophies. So if you
Yeah.
don't mind just giving my audience a quick bio background on your
Yeah.
academic career, your competitive career, and your coaching career.
Sure. Well, starting off with that, I think that there's a way to kind of sift through if your deal is working through the internet. There's three factors, right? You have a bar stool; it can stand on three legs; it can't stand on two, right? The three pillars, in my opinion, for somebody to have a valuable opinion is how strong are they personally? Because strength starts to show at different levels adversity, right? Like I remember being stuck at a 500-pound bench for 2 fucking years and I didn't get any stronger until I got smarter. I remember being stuck at a 750-pound squat for 3 years until I got smarter and hit 800. There's these certain areas and plateaus that strength really teaches you to push through. And sometimes it's not working harder, it's working smarter. The next step is education. So if a person has a master's degree, a doctoral degree, then that means that they've been willing to take their own money, time, effort, and energy and put it into improving themselves educationally. So it doesn't mean everything, right? Like Louis Simmons didn't barely pass high school, but it
Right.
doesn't mean he wasn't smart. It just means that sometimes this three pillar rule that I have tends to sift through a lot of bullshit. So how strong are you? How educated are you? And then thirdly, and maybe most importantly, is how long were you able to sustain those progressions? Meaning, like if someone's just out of the rock, like a bottle rocket, they're out of the gate insanely strong quickly, they might just be genetic freaks. It doesn't mean they know anything. But a person that's super strong, highly educated, and somebody that stayed super strong for 2-3 decades, now I want to kind of hear what they have to say. If you start looking at people like that, it starts really narrowing the gap of who you would listen to. Guys like Stan Efferding, right? World record powerlifter, IFBB pro bodybuilder, and did world record numbers in his 40s and talks like he has a PhD because he reads just like I do, maybe even more. I would especially listen to anything he has to say when it comes to diet. But you start looking at people like that, it starts really narrowing down the type of people that you would want to listen to, because there's super strong guys that don't have any education. There's guys that have longevity, but they've never done anything. And you got guys that have PhDs that have no practical experience.
Right.
But all three of those combined makes a very, very solid person to listen to if you want my three pillars of ideals. For me, high school was difficult because my father died right before I started my freshman year. Didn't really know what I was going through at the time, and lifting kind of saved my ass. As I started training harder and going to school fatigued, probably with some sort of small ADHD, I got to where I could focus in class because I was tired from training. Therefore, I didn't have all this pent up energy. Then I started eating cleaner because I wanted to be stronger. I was more protein, less carbs, which was easier on my blood sugar and helped my concentration levels. And by the time school came around, I wasn't necessarily kind of brought into the college scene. I did a job shadow at the Indianapolis Colts with John Toring, and he was Peyton Manning's strength coach, and he was at the Colts for upwards of around 15 years. And he asked where I was from, and I said, well, I'm from a little town up north. He goes, where at? And I go, Muncie. He goes, oh, yeah, Ball State. And I'm like, yeah, Ball State. It's my home school. Who cares, right? He's like, that's the #1 exercise science program in the country right now. Dr. Kramer, Dr. Newton, Dr. Kwan, Dr. Trappy, Dr. Pearson, all these guys were NSCA. They started the NSCA. And I'm like, wow, that's only like 3 blocks from my house. So another long story, but I get into school. I end up getting a 3.7 GPA my first semester. And that was kind of written in history. And then I started training with Louie at about the same time. And then by 2003, I do a internship at University of Texas with Jeff Madden. And then 2004 or 5, I finished my master's degree. And then the end of 2005, early 2006, I moved over to train at Westside Barbell. So yeah, that was kind of my pedigree. In the college ranks years, I won a world championship when I was 19. And then I won multiple college USAPL drug tested records, American records. I was ranked 4th in the world in men's IPF when I was a junior, and then started training at Westside Barbell, and Chuck Vogelbull became my training partner, and broke my first world record a couple years later. And for me, that was the piece that I was missing, was the level of intensity that I was going to need to train in order to get to where I wanted to be. And although I had won a world championships at 19, I think for a lot of people to understand where I was at that point was I had already been training really hard with 0 breaks for 7 years. I remember at 12 years old, I'm walking in the grocery store with my mom. I see a magazine, and it's got a football player, a pro football player lifting weights. It was like a Muscle and Fitness. And it says, get better in the off season using Lyle Alzado's training protocol or whatever. And I open it up, I'm like, wow, these guys are lifting weights to play football. Maybe that'll help my legs develop and catch up to my peers. And so for a lot of people that don't know, I was hit by a car when I was in kindergarten going into 1st grade. And so I had to be homeschooled in 1st grade, and I was bedridden for a little over a year. So I couldn't walk, I couldn't move, shattered pelvis, combined, my legs were broken in 10 places. And it was a pretty drastic injury that I had occurred at that point. And so I gravitated to swimming right out of the hospital bed because it didn't hurt my legs.
Right.
But by the time I wanted to play football in 7th grade, my legs were behind impact. It didn't like running. It didn't like pressure like that. And so I thought maybe being a pretty smart kid back in the day, or just a total fucking dumbass, was like, maybe if I go in and lift weights, maybe it'll make my legs catch up and I can play football with my friends. And the iron bug bit me, and I drove into weights 100%. Still played football through high school, and was good enough to get some small D1 scholarship offers as a nose tackle. But I just knew I wasn't tall enough. I saw a lot of the guys going pro, and they were 6'3" at minimum, and I was 6 foot and 3/4, almost 6'1". And my foot speed was not necessarily as good as it could have been. And I think maybe if I'd have been in a better area with better coaching, that might have been helpful. But,
right.
I was already squatting by the time I was out of high school. I was already squatting close to 7, benching 5. So I was athletic and I was strong, but I kind of knew the first year out of high school that lifting was really what I wanted to do. And I think Louie kind of pushed me towards that. I met him, and he's like, look, you got a chance that if you can hold together for another 10 years, you could be the best in the world in your weight class. If you make it to football and you do make it maybe past college, you're never going to be the best nose guard. You're not going to be a sap,
Right.
But I could be the best powerlifter ever in my weight class if I could hold on long enough. And so that was a big grab for me. And so as I started to train through that, Louie started to introduce me to some of these books. And I remember reading them and going, I don't even understand what they're talking about. Like, you need to get faster to get stronger. Nobody ever told me that. You needed to work on stability in certain phases. You needed to rotate your exercises and not train the exact same way all the time to keep neurological burnout down. And all these things started to play in my mind. And as I listened to Louis and George Halbert and Chuck Vogelpool, and they started teaching me this rotational system, I didn't get better at first, but about 6 to 8, maybe 10 months later, I started really seeing what was happening. And what was happening is I was getting stronger at everything. I was neurologically never burned out. And then the numbers just started to explode. And that's when I figured out that conjugate, at least for me, was going to be the ticket to the world records.
There's a lot there, a lot of great stuff there. And I mean, the thing that just jumps out to me the most is, and you touched on it, just how long of a career that you had. I mean, you were, as a junior lifter, hitting huge numbers. And I mean, you look at most guys who are incredibly strong at an early age, and I mean, by the time they're 40, they're practically in a wheelchair. Yeah. Right. They're just completely destroyed. Whereas you, I mean, I'm on Instagram, I'm still seeing you doing loaded plyos, and I mean, you look, strong, explosive, and mobile as ever. And I mean, you sustained strength, elite strength from junior to, in 20s and 30s and beyond. And to your point earlier, I think it was just a smart and continuing to get smarter approach to training that allowed you to not only continue to progress, but just to stay durable and injury free over the course of that time.
I think a lot of that was flipping my mindset in my early 20s from a percentage-based understanding of training to a rate of perceived exertion. Yeah. And so that way it allowed daily fluctuation. So it takes a lot of fortitude and a lot of discipline to listen to your body, both positively and negatively, because you can train too easy or you can train way too hard. But I found that I was always honest with myself. And a 9 RPE, I'm very good at gauging, not only with myself, but the people that I train. And I find that I could always recover from a 9 RPE, but I could always have a very difficult time recovering from 10 RPE or 100%. So what I did in my competition days is when I would peak for contests is that I would base my numbers of what I had to hit in the gym on 92 to 94%. I never based it on I bench 600, so I'm going to use 35% of 600 for my speed work, for example.
Yeah.
I would base it on 570 because I knew I could get 570 sick, tired, fucked up. It didn't matter. But 600 had to be perfect. Right. And what I found for me, perfect was just optimally trained, which knocked about 8% off of the numbers when I would go into percentage-based training, usually pre-contest. But I tried to train RPE. I had lengthy off seasons. I worked on weaknesses constantly. I tried to be as balanced and coordinated as I possibly could. And I challenged my body in multiple ways versus the same way all the time. I find that people that train very specifically to powerlifting, example, like squat, bench, deadlift 3 times a week for like a Chico program or any of this other, what I consider complete garbage, is what you find is that it shortens their career and it creates massive amounts of mileage. How do we attack that goal and get stronger with reducing mileage? And that was always my game plan because, I was a world record holder teenager, but it took me 10 more years to be the best in the world in the open. It wasn't like it just happened at 22 years old and I was already a badass. I knew that I had to outlast and outsmart people. With that being said, I dug deep into my research and understanding of volume parameters, different contractile types, maximal efforts, dynamic efforts, repetition efforts, and it paid off. And it made my career last way longer. And that was the whole purpose. If you read A.S. Medvedev or Zasigursky's book, was they didn't want to put, let's say, $2 million into an Olympic level athlete and then have them fall apart in their first gold medal. They wanted them to last for 2 or 3 gold medals, which would be 8 to 12 years of being master of sport. Because if you have someone at an elite level that can hold that for 3 quadrennials, let's say, or 12 years, what's the research I can get out of that person versus the person that only lasts 1 gold medal? And that was their whole thought process. And it's frustrating to me because I find, and I'm sure you're the same way, you find people don't have any long-term mindset. When I get somebody on online coaching, and they want to be a completely different person in 12 weeks, I tell them straight out, I'm probably not your guy. Because my bench, I remember when I hit 606 in 2014, I had to train for 14 months to get my bench to go up the next jump, which was 611.
Yeah. No, it's a great point. I mean, you have to, when it comes to strength, you've got to slow cook it. I mean, it's a slow, long-term process, and you've got to stay healthy over
Yeah.
the course of that time. And I think you made a really good point, which is you see so many lifters getting so overly specific with their training, especially in powerlifting, guys who are just competition, squat, bench,
Yeah.
deadlift. That's all they do. And, with my own training philosophies, I haven't, I've played around with conjugate stuff. But one thing I think in essence, we very much agree on is like, if I'm working with a powerlifter in their off season, I'm trying to get them to do strongman stuff. Like, hey, let's get away from bench. Let's focus on overhead pressing and high incline pressing. Let's get into, front squatting, single leg work. We have to spend at least phases of the year where we're away from the competition lifts. And I try to create just well-rounded, holistic athletes. And I kind of bring that from my background in football strength and conditioning, where we're not married to any one particular lift. We're just trying to make guys just generally well-rounded, bigger, faster, stronger.
Yeah.
And I try to apply that with lifters as well. But just, I wanted to get your thoughts on just kind of the landscape of lifting and training today. In your opinion, do you think that power, not just powerlifting, but lifting in general, is it being done better today compared to, let's say, the 90s, early 2000s, the West Side Prime era, or have things gone downhill?
I think, and again, my opinion is probably going to show my age or bias, is I think there were a lot more smarter coaches 25, 30 years ago. We had Paul Quinn in his prime, right? He's gone.
Yeah.
We had Louis in his prime 30 years ago. He's gone. We had, I'm drawing a blank now, but let's just use those two, for example, two premier people that changed the way strength conditioning was focused on. I don't see people taking their place, right? And I think that's a huge issue. I think what we see now with the world records increasing is that the population grab is bigger in these sub contexts, meaning when I competed and broke my first all-time world record in 2008, there were only 10,000 registered powerlifters in the country. Now there's like 400,000. So of course you're going to have some guys like Colton Edelbright and these other guys are going to flash out every once in a while. Every 30 years we're going to find an Ed Cohen or a Colton or somebody that just does insane things. But it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody's training smarter. I just think the population grab is bigger. But I also think that because we are short attention spans and we're looking for quick fixes, it dooms us as a population, because when you really want to train smart, and I tell people all the time, you can be the strongest fucking guy in the world. You can be the best football player in the world right now. And in 5 years, nobody's going to fucking care. So you better get to that point. I'm not saying to not try to be the best in the world, but don't do it and try to pay for it the least amount as possible. Meaning you need to do it smart. You need to do it injury-free. So when you do walk away or you do decide that you don't want to be the best in the world anymore, or other things come up, you don't have a knee problem, a back problem, a shoulder problem, all of these things that everybody else accumulates because they want to train stupid and they're living in the moment. They don't have that long-term mindset. And so what I find is that lifters in some way, shapes, and forms are becoming bottle rockets. They're quick, they explode, and they're done. And I'm sure you've had people, that you've had on the show and people that we've all listened to, and all of a sudden, where are they at 5 years from now? I remember I was helping a girl named Marley, and she was in St. Louis, so she's about a 12-hour drive from me, and her dad would bring her up about once a month. And she just benched, at that time, she benched 250 at 14 years old at 130 body weight, raw. And she was asking me about these 3 or 4 other girls that were on big, had a pretty big following on Instagram, et cetera, et cetera. And she goes, well, I want to be like these girls. I said, why don't you see where these girls are at in 2 years, and then we'll figure out that's what you want to be. 3 out of the 5 girls that she was emulating or trying to follow were already retired before she got her driver's license.
Guys, thank you for tuning in and supporting the podcast. I just wanted to take a minute to give a shout out over to my guys at Troponin Supplements. So they're the sponsor of the podcast. And in my opinion, they carry the best supplements on the market, and it's not even close. And they're the one company that I've wanted to align myself with. As a nutrition coach working with NFL football players, other professional athletes, strongman competitors, bodybuilders, powerlifters, fitness enthusiasts, endurance athletes, I have to be very particular about any supplement company I endorse. And with Troponin Supplements, frankly, it was a no-brainer. These are the products I've been using myself for the last few years before I ever became involved with the company. I know the owner personally, Justin Harris. He is one of the brilliant minds in the bodybuilding industry. And we've talked, and all he has wanted to do is just bring some of the elite top-of-the-line products to the market. And that's what he's done. So these are the products I recommend and endorse to all my athletes, all my clients. I use myself. And I want to pass this along to you guys as well. So I'm going to highlight a couple products here. First and foremost, we've got the ATP. This is a high dose of caffeine paired with a very powerful nootropic. I take this before work. I take this before I podcast. This is going to give you a great boost in mood, in focus, memory enhancement. You're just going to feel like you took the Limitless pill when you use ATP. It's an effervescent tablet. You drop it in your water, it dissolves, tastes great. The next product, Field Rations. This is the premier intra-workout supplement on the market right now. It's a one-stop shop for all your intra-workout needs. It's based in highly branched cyclic dextrin, contains essential amino acids, electrolytes, tastes amazing. I use this within every training session. Then we've got the Suppressor Max. This is awesome for controlling your blood sugar. It's got a high dose of berberine, but then has complementary ingredients that are going to keep the berberine bioavailable and stay in your system longer. This is the best blood sugar product on the market. If you're bulking, if you're eating a ton of food, if you're using a cheat meal, this is a great product for you. And then finally, I love this one. I've always had sleep issues. Hit the Rack. This is one of the best sleep products I've ever tried. I use it about 30 minutes before bed most nights, and this has been the one supplement that has actually helped me fall asleep and stay asleep. And then, of course, we got the Troponin T logo bodybuilding jersey and the hat. We've got great apparel on the site. So guys, check out Troponin Supplements. You can find the link in the show notes, in the bio, or you can simply just Google Troponin Supplements. Use code HECK, capital HECK, at checkout for a discount. Check them out, guys. These are some of the best products on the market. I was watching an old YouTube video. I don't know if you ever saw this, remember it, but Mark Bell hosted, it was called like the Backyard Powerlifting Meet of the Century. This was in 2012, 2013.
Yeah.
And I was watching this video, and you see all these young lifters, freaky lifters, George Lehman and Pete Rubish, guys like that. And I was just thinking, I was like, God, where are these guys now? Like, there's so many of those dudes who are in their 20s, were freaks. You look around, they've disappeared.
Yeah.
And that's not to, specifically disrespect any of those guys. I don't know their specific situations, but it's a great point. I mean, so many guys who are just the bottle rockets early in their career, and then they disappear.
And I think a lot of that's accelerated with drug use, and not to say that to break world records, you don't have to take anabolics. I'm not saying that I didn't have to do that, but I did it under a doctor's supervision. I kept my levels within range, and I didn't do it like an idiot without blood work. And you find that a lot of those guys just kind of cowboyed it, and then they didn't really get any repercussions from it until it was major, and then they had to completely quit everything. I find that there's always a price to pay for a lot of different things. And not to say that I haven't had some small health issues in the last 2 years, but some of it was genetics. My uncle actually just had a kidney transplant. He's never lifted weights a day in his life.
Right.
My dad and all that. But so I have what the kidney doctors consider something that looks genetic. Now I'm sure I accelerated it with massive amounts of blood pressure, lifting weights that were crazy. I remember being in a satellite study that really didn't mean anything with Kramer when he was still at Ohio State, and we did a blood pressure cuff, and you either had to have a world record or win a world's strongest man to be in that. And I come in, and at that time I had squatted 865, and so he worked me up to 800 in the lab, and we put a blood pressure cuff on. And my blood pressure was 290 over 210 doing the lift. And so imagine doing that for 30 years.
Yeah.
So again, not to say that anabolics probably didn't play a little bit of a role to it, but there's just no studies out with people that are done it that long. And so for me, I think you see a lot of those guys, like what you're talking about with that back thing, they had to take so many drugs to be that strong that you can't sustain that.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And I mean, look, the fact is, if you're going to be competing at the highest level possible, no matter how smart you do it, it's going to take a few years off your life. If you're trying to be the best in the world at anything,
Anything.
I don't care if you're a CEO or whatever,
Yeah.
like there's some loss of balance in your life, and just the strain and just mental focus you've got to put into
Yeah.
something. Like there's always some sort of an unhealthy component to it.
Which is
Um,
crazy though to think, like look how, I mean, Hulk Hogan just died today and he was 71. I mean,
yeah,
how much shit did he have to blast in the 80s and 90s and 2000s to look that jacked? I mean, it's just
exactly.
unbelievable. I mean, you figure Macho Man Randy Savage is dead. Ultimate Warrior, which was a total psycho, is dead. But I can't believe Hulk Hogan lived till he was over 70.
I know. Hey, sometimes people just win the genetic lottery. I mean, you'll see the guy who smokes cigarettes every day of his life, and then he lives to be 80. And then there's the guy who just out of nowhere, gets cancer for no damn reason.
My
Um,
grandfather was a machinist for General Motors, and up until he was about 68, he would go to the doctor once a year, and his diet was a bucket of KFC chicken and a case of beer a day. I'm not even shitting you. And he did that for about 45 years. And he didn't get any health issues from it until he was closer to 80. And he lived till he was almost 90. That was my mom's dad. But just talk about but then my uncle smoked and lived a kind of a hard life. The one that got me into motorcycles, he died at 36.
yeah.
I think it's just a dice roll, and it's cumulative. It's kind of what your lifestyle is. It's how hard you push your body. But I think it really comes down to stress levels and sleep.
No, I completely agree with that. I mean, everyone kind of looks at the training or drugs in a vacuum. You got to look at just the way you're living life as a whole. I think you're right. Just all the cumulative cortisol from just stress and lack of sleep and all those things is probably what really takes ultimately the biggest toll on you over time.
I agree.
And you made an interesting point, which I totally agree with earlier, just going back to, is training being done at a higher level today? And I think it's easy to create this illusion that, well, okay, we've got all these, world records being broken. We've got all these just freakish lifters coming onto the scene. And it's easy to create this illusion that, okay, well, therefore training methodologies must be better. But to your point, now that powerlifting and strongman, it's all over Instagram and YouTube, and it's just become more mainstream popular through social media. There's just so many more people competing.
And I think you might be able to attest to this because I don't know what your age is, but I was more impressed in the late 90s walking into the Indianapolis Colts weight room around the year 2000, which was 25 years ago, than I have been the last few times I've walked into other pro teams. As far as the intensity in which they're training, the level at which they're doing shit. They're like, I know why you got out of it. It's fucking paid babysitting. It
is there, and it's just what I think it is just with the spectrum has swung too far to everything is data driven. It's medical, it's rehab driven, it's data driven by guys who, to your point, you talked about the 3-pronged approach, being strong, having the experience and the educational background. Mm-hmm. There's all these sports scientists who just have the lab background.
I'm not a fan of sports scientists with 10-inch fucking around arms, dude. Like
exactly. That's all.
Let's talk your science when we put 405 in your hand and you go down and bench it.
Exactly. No,
everything the problem is when you're basing all of your training on science. And again, it doesn't mean that all science is bad, but you have to look at the subjects in which is being used. And the problem is that most strength training subjects being used in current literature is based on novices. It's easy to go from shit to suck. It's hard to go from good to great.
Yeah. No.
So what population had the great athletes that were actually studied? The Russians, the Bulgarians, and the East Germans, which is predominantly what I read because all the newbie gains with those guys are gone. And then all of a sudden Medvedev figures out they need 100 different exercises for the clean and jerk and snatch. Like, what? Oh, you mean you can't just do the specific work all the time and keep getting better and better, because there's a limit to adaptation and how much stress you can apply in a particular workout. So the only method that you can utilize, or the only type of training that you can utilize and understand for adaptation purposes and time purposes, is changing the mode of the exercise, because now it's a new stimulus creating new results that haven't previously been tapped into from the traditional exercises, which are called special strength training exercises, right?
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And I want to get into that right now. I'll close with as far as the, strength and conditioning in the sports setting, our mutual friend, Joe Ken, his quote is, they've taken the strength out of strength and conditioning
Absolutely.
in those settings. And it's so true. But anyway, going now, I want to dive into everything that you just talked about as far as just exercise variation, a rotation of exercises. If anyone were to look at your training and a lot of the information that you put out, two things that are going to jump out is a wide variety of exercise variation being used. And then also a lot of volume being used.
Yes.
So I want to go into the exercise rotation thought process first.
Okay.
So is it all planned? Is it controlled chaos? How are you choosing your variations when it comes to variations meant to augment competition lifts or your primary lifts?
Simplicity, the simplest way for me to describe that for everyone to understand is that we're in a constant assessment. So if I have somebody do a barbell back squat and we're in competition mode, or we're doing a mini max in the gym, maybe we're not competing, but we're going to push to see where our 1 rep maxes are to make sure that our percentages on our speed work are more dialed. And when you're looking for those small subtleties, their hamstrings aren't activating 100%. They're not using enough glutes. There's something wrong with their thoracic spine. Technique is not correct. Let's focus in on one area. Let's say we see a guy, which we see quite often, their chest falls at the bottom of a squat.
Yeah.
So now what I'm starting to see is that because their thoracic spine, they can't hold posture under load, or is it because their body's trying to shift over to the ball of the foot to use more quadricep and get off the posterior chain? Either way, it's a posterior problem. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to implement more good mornings, more safety bar. I'm going to implement more 45-degree back extensions, and I'm going to attack the problem with a varied amount of exercises that are going to harness in on those areas for the next 12, 15, 20 weeks. That gives me enough time to have adaptation occur to where when I reapply the main compound movement, which is the squat, the bench press, and the deadlift are measuring and assessment tools only. They're not good training tools because they're the actual lift that you're trying to get better. It sounds crazy. I get it. But the point is, those lifts dictate all the other variabilities that you utilize. And if I see something, knees come in, I know what 5 or 6 exercises I need to throw in. I see their thoracic spine break over. I know what exercises I need to throw in. If I see their knees go way over their toes, I know what exercises I need to bring in. And as I bring those in, it fixes technique automatically. Doesn't mean we're not constantly yelling at each other for different technical cues, but the point being is like the weeks build upon themselves. So what I'll do is I'll see what I want to see, and then I'll build it for 3 to 5 weeks, and then I'll switch it to something else before the body fully accommodates to the actual stimulus.
Got it. That's what I was going to ask you next was how frequently you rotate through those variations. So
usually if you read a lot of Mevdiev stuff and you read a lot of Verkhoshansky stuff, you'll start finding that they talk a ton about 3 and 4 week waves. It's almost everywhere. And they say it that they do it for different reasons. Some of it's metabolic properties, other is ligament tendons, others is lack of training burnout. Neither of them are more important than the other, but there's a reason why they studied so in depth biorhythms, and biorhythms follow about a 30-day wave. So if you look at it as 3 weeks of loading in a progressive fashion with 1 week in a deload phase, it's a transitional week, you are following biorhythm properties that the Russians studied for I don't even know how long.
Right.
And so you run through these different phases and you start to realize that, you just have, like, I think it works in monthly phases. And I felt it for years. There's certain parts of the month where I feel really fucking strong, or my cognitive level is really high, where my speed feels really good. And there's other months or other weeks where I'm like, why do I feel so flat today? Why do I not feel my strongest? And as I started to time those things, I started to figure out it was about 3 and 4 week waves. And so if I just let the wave play itself out over the course of 12, 14, 20, 30 months, I started to notice that my progression over that period of time was linear, but that linear, when you broke it down, was actually in waves.
Right.
And so I think that 3 and 4 week waves are optimal for getting enough stimulus in a specific way to see the change, but then it changes fast enough that you don't get the psychological burnout.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And okay, so once you've selected, a variation that you're going to train for a given 3 to 4 weeks, are you training that variation for both max effort and dynamic effort within
The
the week?
dynamic effort works in usually a 3 week wave. We go a little too light, then we go to just dial in the groove. Then the next week we go optimal to make sure we're training that optimal range. And then the next week we do it just a little bit too heavy to work a little bit more of that strength speed side, right? I'm not talking like 80%. I'm talking a different percentage, but we even rotate how hard it is. Week 1 feels easy, but the volume's high. Week 2, the weight is optimal for speed work and the volume's optimal. Week 3, it's a little too heavy and the volume is dropped slightly.
Okay.
That's how we do that. And then usually we throw in a high volume exercise in between that, like a German volume training, 10 sets of 10, to give the CNS a little bit of a break and then hyperload the muscles for hypertrophy and ligament and tendon density. Again, there's a property to everything. The max effort work, what we do to modify that at the advanced level is we create limiters, or what I call governors. So let's say me and you go in and we have a squat workout, right?
Yeah.
And we don't have any limitations. I let you go down as fast as you want. I let you pause on the box as long as you want. We just go for blood. Well, that's maximal. But if we did the same 1RM with a 5-second eccentric, which is going to lower the amount of weight you can put on the bar by probably 20%, or we do a 2-second pause in the bottom, is that still maximal?
Well, I mean, not in terms of how heavy you can load it, but in terms of effort, I mean.
Is it maximal in that context?
In that context, yeah.
Exactly. So what we do is we change context.
Got it. Yeah, that makes total sense. So
when we change context, then it allows us to actually do max effort work, or we do a 5 RM instead of a 1 RM, and now it's 5 times the volume. And if you can do it for 5, you should be able to do way more for 1.
Right.
So my point being is change the context in which that max effort work is applied with the same exercise for 3 weeks.
No, that makes total sense. I mean, you're like you said, you're adding a governor to it. You're adding some sort of component to the lift that just makes it inherently more challenging, but requires a lower load to still get that max effort strain stimulus that you're going for. Just on the speed work, do you use a bar accelerometer? Are you putting any actual a number meters per second on it?
Yep. Yeah, usually what I find is on that little bit of a light day, we're hitting around 1.1 meters per second.
Yeah.
On the optimal day, we're around 0.85. And on a little bit too heavy, we're around 0.7.
Well, let me ask you this. And it seems like your philosophy around dynamic effort work is faster than what you often see from Westside Barbell training footage. I'll go on YouTube. I'll see a dynamic effort session.
I know what you're getting ready to ask, and I'll tell you why. Think about how much slower on the eccentric phase equipped lifting is versus raw.
That's true.
Raw lifting takes more athleticism than equipped lifting in the muscle sense, because the eccentric phase is not controlled by external equipment. So what I found was if I used the same percentage for raw that Louis prescribed in equipment to raw training, I overtrained and it did not synergistically help my max day. I tried it for 2 years. And what I found was that if I dropped the percentage down, Then I recovered from the dynamic work, and my max effort day shined. That's what you should be looking for.
Yeah.
Is this making my max day stronger? Because a lot of people attack dynamic work and they think that that's where all their bread and butter is at because, it's more sports specific. Well, who gives a shit about sports specific if you're playing football and all you bench is 300? We had one of the top guys. So I had that seminar. I don't know if you saw it, but I did a seminar in Seattle in May. And one of their top offensive linemen showed up at the seminar. He just signed like a 3-year, $55 million deal, and he couldn't bench 350.
Yeah, it's shocking how weak a lot of those guys are.
You know the questions he had for me?
What?
What he should be doing for dynamic effort method.
Okay.
And I'm like, why don't you worry about getting fucking stronger?
Right.
Like, it's a lot easier to utilize the dynamic method at an elite level if you're benching 455 versus 330.
Yeah. No, it's a great point.
And he's like, man, the coaches won't let us go that heavy. I have to go to a private place to actually be able to bench press over 315 because they're scared I'm going to get hurt.
Exactly. And that, again, back to that, they're taking the strength out of strength and conditioning. It's everyone just wants to cover their ass. Yep. Nobody wants to push these guys hard. God forbid someone tweaks a pec in the weight room.
Yeah.
It's everyone's just covering their ass. Well, no one's getting trained anymore.
Think about it in his time. Harrison, right? Played for the Steelers.
Yep. James Harrison.
Okay. James Harrison. I met him at a seminar that Charles Poliquin was putting on in Arizona. And how many times did you ever see him post actually working out at the Steelers?
Never.
At the Steelers facility. Now, everybody was like, hey, would you like to go work out at the Steelers facility? Hell yeah, I would. Why is Harrison going to these private places and hitting these big numbers and he's not doing it with the team? And we both know why.
Yep. No, it's so true. I mean, most of those guys, as soon as it's no longer mandatory to be in that facility, they scatter and they go off to their private coaches.
Yeah, Mobley, I've been helping Mobley at the Cleveland Cavs, and he just won Defensive Player of the Year.
Yeah.
And he bought a belt squat that I custom made for him. It's called their Gargantuan, so it's 6 inches taller and 6 inches wider because the dude's like 7'2".
Yeah.
And all we did was get him a little bit stronger, and he started to shine like a superstar. But what was crazy was when I trained him, I had to fly out to L.A. because he wanted all this shit at his house. I'm like, why aren't you just staying in Cleveland in the offseason and just training in Cleveland? It's a 2-hour drive. Big deal. Oh, man, I want to live because he went to UNC. He's from that area. He wants to live in that area, be around his friends. And that's cool. It's whatever. But you notice the guys like Kobe and Jordan and all them, they didn't give a shit. It was all about, I'm coming for you to break your arms. I want to win that bad. And every once in a while you get a guy like that. And I'm not saying Mobley's not like that, but there's a limit to it, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I started to realize, like, the guys that really want to push and do the big things, they're doing it on their own.
Oh, it's so true. And I mean, it's honestly, it's an embarrassment to the sports strength and conditioning programs. And I mean, that's why I left. Like we're not training guys anymore. No one's even sticking around to train them.
Well, and you could tell that the top guys have just said, fuck it. Like, give me okay, you're big into football. You played football. Who's the head strength coach to the Detroit Lions?
Honestly, I couldn't even tell you off the top of my head.
Guess what? I don't fucking know either.
Yeah.
Now, this is the top 5 team in the NFL, and they don't have the predominant baddest ass strength coach like a Charles Poliquin or something up there. It shows you what the importance is. It's jack shit.
Yep.
To them, it doesn't matter. They just don't want to get the guys hurt. And when you show up at the pros, you are what you are. And if you get better, that's on you. But, it's not. You're just a fucking racehorse, man.
Yeah, no, that's so spot on. And man, it's an embarrassment in a lot of ways. But again, that's why I got out of it.
Yeah, I'll bet, dude.
But let me ask you this. I want to get into the Wenning warm-ups. And actually, just before I get off the rotation of exercises, do you apply that same rotational concept to all of your accessory work as well? Are you running those in 3 to 4 week waves, rotating?
I try to, and I just changed the repetition range.
Okay.
So if I write 8 RPE, then that means I probably can get 12 to 15. If I write 8.5, 9 RPE, in my mind, I'm getting like 8, maybe 6. But I try to keep those in a little bit more of a hypertrophy range because I've just attacked low repetition ranges with either max effort work or speed work. And so, being ahead of the curve, what I started to realize was what am I looking at in a vast array of repetition ranges to not miss any particular growth points that may or may not be missing? And
Yeah.
so my initial thought process, and kind of going into your next question, is okay, if I'm in the 3s and 5s or below for main lifts, then I know 8s, 12s, and 15s I'm not hitting on the main lifts. So I know those need to be accessories. And we know that within reason, we know that that's a hypertrophy range. So I select exercises that I feel are structurally sound, posturally sound, and correcting weaknesses.
Yeah.
Now, leading into your next thing with winning warm-ups, what powerlifter do you know before me that was doing shit for sets of 25?
Nobody. I mean, you're the first one who I picked that up from.
So I had read some stuff that was, I can't remember which Russian book it was, and they talked about extremely high volume for ligament and tendon density, but then also that it develops extreme work capacity. And so my initial thought process was I need more work capacity. It had nothing to do with ligaments and tendons until I started digging in my books. And then when I started applying it to the main lift and utilizing it with other weak muscle group areas that I was getting ready to attack on the main lift, i.e. dumbbell bench press before barbell bench press, lat pull downs before bench press, tricep push downs of various kinds, what I started to know is my body was more innervated to use those muscles. And then my technique got better, and then my strength got better. And then no matter how long I had to wait between, say, attempts at a powerlifting meet, or no matter how tired I was when I got done squatting a world record and I had to bench 600 pounds, I always had the energy because I was used to being in a deficit. But you notice that people that argue about, well, you're not putting all your prime energy into your main lift. When does that ever happen? Number one. And number two, with an RPE between 3, 4, and 5, you're telling me that doing shit for 25 and an RPE of 4 is making you too tired to max? Get the fuck out of here. You're weak, you're lazy, and you're out of shape. That's what it is.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I'm using very Wenning warm-up-esque approaches within my own training right now. I start off every session with 20 minutes of doing circuit work, very high volume. Good. And I've been working with Joe Ken on programming, and he is somebody who's adopted a lot of your Wenning warm-up philosophies. And I'm in just such better shape. My work capacity is so much higher. And, when I first started doing these, I was gassed by the end of it. But now I'm at a point where I'm just flying through. And I finished up that high volume warm up and I'm totally unfazed. I'm getting into my main work. I feel fantastic. And I'm able to, and I'm just recovering so much better between sets of my main exercises. And I think I'm recovering better. My body composition's improving, a number of different variables. So
tell me which of those variables is not important.
Yeah, exactly. And it comes back to just training a holistic, well-rounded athlete, not just somebody who's specialized in squat, bench, deadlift. Like, you got to be in great shape, especially with strongman. These guys have to be in great condition.
They're crazy.
The GPP work gets so neglected.
Yeah, and that's why I started to develop it. I had squatted the third highest squat of all time at a powerlifting meet, and then my bench fell to like 572. I didn't have the conditioning. And so that's what started the process in 2012. And then as I started to master it, I experimented with the bench press first. Then the next powerlifting meet I did, I squatted the all-time world record, and then I benched 606. So I realized I was onto something, then applied it to the squat, and I took the world record squat from 832 to 870.
Yeah, no, I can see why. And it's a component in my training that I think over the last few years, when I think about what are some tools that I've really added to my own training philosophy, the Wenning warm-up approach is a big one that I've really latched onto.
Well, I'm glad you got a hold of it, man. That's awesome.
Just for the audience, for those who aren't really specifically aware of what we're talking about, could you give an example of what a Wenning warm-up might look like, let's say on a squat day?
Yeah, so what you would do is on the squat, you would let's say the bench press, because I think that applies to more people and it's easier to understand.
Point. Yeah.
The bench press, what you would do is a light set of dumbbells for 4 sets of 25. Then you would do 1 set of those dumbbells. Then you would do a set of lat pull downs, and then you would do a set of tricep push downs. Keeping in mind that the speed in which you're doing it is technically sound, but the but you're trying to work through it as a GPP.
Hmm.
You're not trying to do it slow and steady like a bodybuilder. You're doing it smooth and controlled, but it's still quick pace with no rest in between. You repeat that circuit 3 to 4 times, maybe two if you're first starting, and then you hop straight into the bench press. That allows you to prime those muscles, potentiate those muscles, and then develop the ligament tendon density and the conditioning needed in order to make future progress. And then you bench. Now those exercises have to be rotated. A lot of times it will involve rotator cuff movements like poliquin internal external rotators. It'll involve a lot of different movements based on what I've seen on the last few max effort days. And so we do that, and that's kind of what it is.
And do you over time, and I think you kind of answered this just when you mentioned the rotation of exercises, are you
Yeah.
trying to overload these week to week,
No.
go heavier? You keep them
Nope.
light.
They stay light. Like people just don't get it. Now, depending on or not, if you're in an off season, you could push the winning warm-ups past that RPE range. But if you're trying to truly increase your maximum training at that time, that's where it gets very complex and long-term thought process. The winning warm-ups can be used as a devastating tool before a main lift, but you can't do that in season. And so
Okay.
sometimes we will do that, but I don't like to tell people that because it destroys their main lift. Well, I know that if I'm using, say, 100-pound dumbbells for 4 sets of 25 and 130-pound dumbbell flat pull downs and say, fat bar tricep push downs, and I'm doing that on say 100, 110 on the stack, I'm cooked, right?
Right.
But it rests 5 minutes, and then what ends up happening is I can still bench. Say back in the day, I can still bench 560. Well, I know 615's there because if I can bench 560 that fucking tired,
Yeah.
what I try to tell people is how tired do you think you're going to be when you squat a world record and then you have to bench press?
Yeah. No, it's a good point. You'll be very fatigued.
You're going to be cooked.
Yeah. No, I think that getting used to that pre-fatigue, I think that's a huge factor as well. To your point, okay, you're so used to training hard in that pre-fatigue state, coming off that high volume warm up, then suddenly when you remove the warm up, well, suddenly you're just that much more fresh, and
Yeah.
there's going to be that much more weight that
Yeah.
you can load on the main lift. So just staying on the GPP topic, what are some other tools you use for just work capacity GPP? I know you're a guy who's utilized a lot of sled work.
We do a ton of sled work, especially in the fair weather. In Ohio, we get about 4 months of weather that just intolerable to be outside. I mean, you're
Yeah,
looking at 20-degree temperatures. And it's not that you can't do it, but we just go with the treadmill turned off. We do a lot of 50-pound weight vest ruck marches. We'll do
mm,
dynamic warm up with ankle weights and weighted vests. We do you know we do jump rope that's fairly low impact. I do a lot of, like, I'll walk 10 10 minutes 4 or 5 times a day at a brisk pace.
yeah,
Now that I've moved out in the country, I got 5 acres that I have to mow and trim.
yeah,
So that's a total fucking, work hog. But yeah, just stuff like that. I've been working on my truck, and that's extensive. I pulled out one of the coils of my trucks. I'm building a Baja, like a desert racing truck, and the one of those spring coils weighs like 170 pounds, and you're trying to put it in an area where you don't want to scratch the frame, and you're working all those little areas pretty hard. So I try to stay pretty busy working on my cars and stuff like that, and I find that does pretty well. But what I find with most people, and I'm not saying this is you, but what I find with most people that want to talk about conditioning is they're trying to mask what they're eating like shit.
yeah,
And so I'm not saying I don't have cheat meals. I'm not the leanest guy in the world, but I don't eat like an asshole often. And
right.
so I try to be very conscientious about what I'm doing with that.
Yeah, well, the bulk of what I do is nutrition coaching. So, I mean, if there's anyone who's a proponent of lifters adopting quality nutrition, it's me. And it has been an
Yeah.
absolute game changer for myself and for many of the athletes I work with. So,
Yeah.
and I've always respected just a lot of the information you put out around your diet. Um, So I
I
mean,
don't know how you get anybody to listen, so I'm impressed.
yeah. Well, luckily, now that I'm out of football, the people I work with are those who come to me, and not the guys I'm required to work with. So,
Yeah.
um, let me ask you this: just something I see you putting out there sometimes is plyometric training.
Mm.
Where do you fit plyos into the context of powerlifting and strength training?
Well, as I started to study more of the force velocity curve and started to read a lot more on Verkhoshansky, which he's more of a plyometric guy, I started to realize that some of that was being ignored in my training 20 plus years ago. And I started adding that back in an off season. So right now we're doing jumps and plyo push-ups instead of actually speed benching and squatting.
Okay.
And what I find is that when I come back to the speed squatting and speed benching is that I'm kind of reborn in it, so to speak. Not to say that I feel extremely strong right off the rip, but I noticed by week 6, week 8, week 10 that I put the classic speed work with barbells and things back in. I'm so refreshed and I feel so good that I'm moving so fucking fast. And what I realize is that you don't want to ignore any portion of the force velocity curve. Powerlifters train at the very top tail end of near isometric. That's where powerlifting is done. But it doesn't mean that all that shit below is not super important. So if you go from maximal strength to strength speed to speed strength to explosiveness, you got to have explosive context in your training. And I feel that once every 6 months, you need to have blocks of just explosive fucking power built. Whether that's we used to use and we still do sometimes hill sprints of 20 yards. Now we're not sprinting for a mile,
Right.
we're doing stuff that's still in 6 and 8 second blocks, or very similar to energy output times for squatting, deadlifting, or benching. But we try to maintain the time of tension and then we try to rotate those movements around. And I think giving yourself a little bit of a break on that not only makes your training fun and absorbable, but it also just gives you a little bit of a break from that barbell that after a handful of years can get kind of monotonous. And
Yeah.
I think that a lot of lifters miss out on that. And I think it's because, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, you've been training a lot of people too, but powerlifting, for example, is usually a sport people get into that they weren't good athletes at anything else.
100%.
So they
100%.
don't like plyometrics because it makes them look unathletic. They
Yeah.
don't like doing, depth jumps because they feel stupid doing it. The point being is you need to have a vast array of training in your library and you need to be able to rotate it. And I think when you lose athleticism, it's the first step into losing your ability to train smart.
No, and this all just circles back to this idea of holistic, well-rounded training, leaving no stone unturned and really training every quality and just attacking a broad range of different qualities. And when you're just well-rounded like that, I think that contributes so much to everything you've talked about: durability, longevity, overall development, holding off mental burnout. I mean, it's a great point. Just throwing in a change up like plyometrics or some
Hmm.
sprint work. I mean, it's a great refreshing break from just the
Yeah.
monotony of the
I just
barbell.
I just think it's tough because people tend to only look at weights in two ways. Is it making me bigger or is it making me stronger?
Right.
Where's the fucking middle?
Yeah. It's a good
And
point.
if you don't have the middle and you don't have 5 or 6 different, or maybe even 20 different goals to attack, you're going to burn out real quick. There are a handful of people out there that can train ultra specific and they never get burned out. I haven't met one yet,
I
but
haven't either.
I know they exist. And, you got to remember there's a vast difference between how the Soviets looked at training versus how the Bulgarians made the athletes fit the system.
Mm.
The Russians developed the system to mold and help the athlete. So the athlete controlled the system. The coaching did it as well. But the Bulgarians had a very few amount of exercises and they just pushed them to the fucking moon. And whoever broke got the hell out, and whoever made it to the Olympics. So it's like a cutthroat system. Whereas the Russians realized they could have hundreds of lifters if they had a system that fit the athlete and worked around all these different contractile types. I don't understand how this is 60 fucking years old and nobody realizes it. Like, dude, you're not Bo Jackson.
Right.
So you need to train all these different systems and get them as good as you can. Because once you go into a focus point of only one way to train, you're probably not going to last more than 2 to 4 years, in my personal opinion.
No, I think that's absolutely spot on. And I'm not going to keep you much longer. I just got a couple more questions for
Yeah,
you.
sure.
Um, Here's one. What do you think that Louis Simmons got wrong, if anything? Is there anything that jumps out to you about Louis and
Yeah.
what they were doing at West Side that you disagree with?
Mm, well, it's a tough one. There's a couple things. One, I think if Louis would have made everyone transition to Raw around 2010, 11, about the time I
Mm,
did, I think his lineage would have been a lot more remembered.
yeah,
But I think he just couldn't let go of the gear. And I think that the reason that that happened was because he always wanted to train with the guys. And I always got the sense when I was there from 99 to '08 is that he always wanted to train with the guys. And so if all of us completely took all the gear off, I remember one day Greg Penora and I were squatting. And what I started to realize was I was burning out in the gear too often. So what I did was I developed this system talking to Verkashansky, actually talked to him through his daughter, that why don't we have maxes raw, moderately equipped, and then fully equipped, and then we can rotate them. And now we can train more specific exercises, but we can have raw maxes, brief maxes, and suit maxes. And so we started rotating that. Well, there was one day that was just a belt. And I remember Louis getting mad at us because he had to put on a really stout pair of briefs to squat with us. And he was
yeah,
bitching at us the whole time. Keep in mind, Greg and I both did 700 plate weight with 200 pounds of chain that day for a double in just a belt. So
yeah.
900 top weight. And we were both, 1,100 plus squatters at the time. And I remember him bitching and complaining, I don't know why you guys don't put any fucking gear on. This is bullshit, blah, blah, blah. I think he could have opened up more variety, but he didn't want to feel ashamed that he was too old to train that way anymore. Because if he'd have took those briefs off, his hips would have shot into the wall.
Yeah,
He was 65 years old at the time, and it was impressive to see. I saw him squat that 900 when he was like 56 or whatever
yeah.
it was, and it was impressive as shit. But the point was is that he wasn't able to hold together with the gear, and sometimes his limitations became the guy's limitations.
Yeah, no, that's a great insight. That's a good point.
Yeah, and I'm not saying I'm 100% right on that. It's just what I saw and what
Yeah.
I felt at the time. And I think that he got so competitive with wanting to be the best that we really didn't have a lot of off seasons. He would burn guys out too fast. I think he started to lose fact that somebody could be better 5 years down the road with a little bit of patience versus trying to beat them into the fucking ground and then they're dead in 2 years.
Around that kind of 2011, 12, 13 time when you start seeing, the Stan Efferdings, Dan Greens doing a lot of the raw stuff, did you or any of the other West Side guys ever say to Louis, like, hey man, like the sport is trending raw. Like we should jump on this train? Was there ever a conversation like that?
We'll notice that I left in 2008.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean,
So
you were ahead of the curve
2009
on
and
that.
10, the only drive I had in equipped lifting was to beat Louis' ass at his own meets. And that's
Yeah.
what I did. If you watch that West Side versus the World documentary,
Yeah.
it's pretty true what all went down. By 2011, I was the lightest guy to hit 1,200 in the squat, but I saw it starting to go raw. And in 2012, I do an all raw bench meet and I hit my first 600, which I think there was only recorded. I think there was only one or two other guys that had ever done it from West Side Barbell, like in a contest.
Right.
And I got so much popularity from that, at least in my little small world, that I noticed that, wait a minute, I don't have to put on the bench shirts anymore. I don't have to put on the squat suits anymore. This is going to cut my training time down by like half. And it's going to mean more to everybody else because equipment was just getting crazy. I remember squatting that 1,200, and when I picked it up out of the rack, I literally felt my femurs bow.
Yeah.
And that's when I knew I didn't have the testicles anymore.
Right.
Like, it's like I make one small move, I'm not walking right ever again if I'm lucky. And
Yeah.
so when I flipped back to Raw, I saw that Scott Weech had the world record at 826, and I'm like, I got a chance to hit 832 before I hang it up and retire. And I did, and I pushed past that. But I don't know what transpired in his head, because when I left in 2000 into 2008, equipment was still top dog. There was no, it wasn't that yet. I saw the writing on the wall and I changed, and I think that helped, but there wasn't enough of me people wise to go around from Westside Barbell to make conjugate have a big enough of a wave in the raw community, when it
Yeah.
really has everything to do with what we're doing, because the Olympic lifting, I feel, is far more detrimental to the body than powerlifting, just based on range of motion and the speed of the lifts. But um, people don't want to sit down and read anymore. They either want to be good at it in a very short period of time, or they want to fucking quit.
Yeah. No, that's the world we're living in. Everything's a short attention span, instant
Yeah.
gratification world.
I
And
became a great raw lifter by the age of 33, 34.
yeah,
So think about that. You know, I was already obviously breaking world records in equipment in my late 20s, but it took a lot of sack to want to take all that off and be the best in the world at 308 and then attack another goal in a completely different area. I look at it like driving NASCAR versus driving Formula One. They're still both fucking psychotic and they're still are great drivers, but they're very different cars. And powerlifting, raw and equipped, are the same way. That's why there's only been one of me, or maybe very few of me, that have had world records both in equipped and raw. It's like learning a completely different game set. But remember what I talked about when Louis got pissed off at me. Every third week, I would train raw. So I was doing 565, 585 bench. I remember one time at Louis' place, and it was just on a whim. There was a guy there that was a raw bencher, and he's like, "Hey Matt, go bench with this guy." I did 585 for a double when I was 27. I was 645s on each side, but I was benching 844 in a shirt.
right.
So, but there weren't too many guys that could do that. Me, George Halbert, Greg Kenora was really strong raw. The rest of them, you took the gear off, and it was night and day scenario because of Louis' influence on that, I believe.
Yeah, no, that I think that's a great point about just Louis' take on it and his own kind of unwillingness to adopt the raw side
Yeah.
because of his own physical limitations as
Well,
he
and
got
I'll tell
older.
you who would have a better insight on that would be Dave Tate, because he knew him longer than I did.
Yeah,
And I didn't come around till 99, but Dave Tate had been there since I think 89 or 90.
right.
And I talked to Dave about it quite a few times, and we've talked a little bit about, was it different when Louis was younger? Was he listening more? And Dave always says yes and no. Like if you came up with something new, Louis be like, "Yeah, it's fucking garbage. It won't work, blah, blah, blah." But as soon as somebody used it and then they got better in the meat, there was an article about it. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? And they're
yeah,
like, "What the fuck?" So it's
right.
weird. I think it's difficult. And all the time that I was there and trying to improve Westside Barbell, leave my mark at Westside Barbell, you know, um, be what you consider like a tattooed member, is
Yeah.
the big thing is I was trying to read and pick up stuff that maybe Louis missed and bring him new information. I didn't realize I was digging my own fucking grave. And one of the biggest things that got between me and Louis was Buddy Morris. 2006, Buddy comes down to Westside Barbell, and he's the head strength coach at that time of the Cleveland Browns. Well, his assistant, and now his name escapes me, he went down to the Jaguars after he left there, Tommy Malinsky.
Yeah.
Well, Tommy Malinsky was getting ready to leave, and unbeknownst to me, Buddy Morris was looking for a new assistant. And Buddy's talking to me. I don't really know who he is at the time. And he's asking me some questions. I think we're doing a circuit max that day. So we have band tension and percentages and whatever. And I'm telling him how we're setting it up and blah, blah, blah. And I'm just talking to him like it's Louis' friend. Well, then down the road, they go to eat. And Buddy's like, "Hey, Matt Wenning, he's got a master's degree, right?" He was like, "Yeah, yeah." He goes, "You think he'd come up and work for the Cleveland Browns? I need a new assistant." And he's like, "I don't know. Here's his phone number. You can call him and ask him." That was the beginning of the end.
Mm,
Because now, what was I going to do? I was fresh out of grad school and I'm getting offered a first assistant job at a pro team, completely skipping the college ranks. So, fuck yeah, I'm going to take the job. Well, I get hired. I start all the initial paperwork. Buddy Morse gets fired the next week.
yeah.
And that was the big thing of going, fuck the pros. I'm not going to have somebody else dictate to me when I'm going to get fucking fired. Because you
Yeah,
could be the best strength coach in the pros. It doesn't matter.
exactly. That's another reason I left was at the end of the day, if the team is your career as a strength coach is just dictated on the wins and losses of the team. You can be the best
Yeah.
strength coach in the world. If the team's losing, you don't have a premier quarterback, you're getting fired. Or
And
on the flip side,
yeah.
you could be a shitty strength coach. And if you've got, Peyton Manning or Patrick Mahomes at quarterback, you're winning games. Well, now you're a Super Bowl ring possessing head strength
Yeah.
coach, right?
I remember the head strength coach for the San Francisco 49ers coming around 2003. And he is not the smartest guy in the toolbox. And I remember going, man, I think I know more than this guy, just being an egotistical fuckhead because I was just squatted like 1,000. And we go to eat with Louis, and Louis he's like, dude, I can't understand how dumb some of these pro strength coaches are. And I was just like, what the fuck? And they were doing pretty good that year. I don't remember exactly what year it was, but I'm like, holy shit. And he's like, dude, it's all about who you know. It has nothing to do with what you know.
Yeah, I was just going to say, unfortunately, and I mean, this applies to so many professional realms. It's
Mm-hmm.
so many of those positions are filled because friends are hiring their friends. It's about
Yeah.
connections. It's not a meritocracy.
No,
Um,
I think the
it-
best thing the NFL could do would be to privatize the strength conditioning and not have it tied to the teams.
yeah, hell yeah.
Like
I
we basically private contract in, and we are ran and governed by the NFL itself as a private entity versus like them switching around when coaches change and shit like that. I think it's garbage.
no, I couldn't agree more.
When have you ever met a football coach that knew a fucking thing about working out and lifting weights? I
Exactly.
don't.
Yeah, they're
You don't.
they're
You
the
don't
ones who
go out there
hire the
and tell
strength
them what
coach.
plays to play, do you? I mean, and
Exactly.
you would have more right to do that because you played.
Exactly.
But
And
they come in to
those
lift weights and like, you want to show me how to get these guys stronger? Bench 500 in front of me right now.
right.
You know?
Yeah, and those football coaches who know nothing about strength and conditioning are the ones hiring the strength coach,
Yeah.
right?
Oh
So,
yeah.
well, Matt, last question for you, and then
Sure.
I'll let you go. How has your philosophy changed, let's say, over the last 5 years? Does anything come to mind? And maybe could expand it to 10 years. But what's an example of something you've changed your mind on?
10 years definitely would be the winning warm-ups. That
Yeah.
started almost 10 years ago. 5 years ago was balancing, health parameters. Once I retired, I knew I didn't need to weigh 290, 300
Yeah.
anymore. Balancing blood work with training. And I
Sure.
think that's a huge factor. And it's something that I do on my personal, private online coaching, which I have a team that does the normal people, the people that are berserker serious. They have to come to the gym, fly from wherever they're at. They have to bring me current blood work, and we have to do a full panel of stuff, especially if they're over the age of 30 or depending on what their goals are. And so I think really tying in how healthy my blood looks, including how strong I can sustain myself, is a proponent. When you're breaking world records, it's all about the number.
Right.
And I think that the last 5 years has shown me that I have to balance that out a little bit better. Not that I lived super unhealthy, but it's changed my diet a little bit. I don't eat 4 and 5 times a day anymore. I eat 3. I make sure that I'm getting my 10,000 steps in a day. Those things were stuff that I don't know that I learned. I just had to start applying as I got into
Right.
my mid 40s.
And I think that's applicable to everyone, really. I mean, just the better your system is operating as a
Yeah.
whole, organ health, blood work, all of that, your recovery is going to be better, your sleep
Yeah.
is going to be better. So everything will improve if
Yeah,
the
and I think
system is running smoothly.
and I think that's a big problem with the powerlifting mindset that I have to look back and look at myself and go, again, are you trying to get numbers with nothing else that matters? You can't live that way very long.
Right.
And so for me, it's always I look at the client and go, we need to balance health with strength.
Right.
Right. You could be the leanest, peelest guy in the room, but if you look like garbage can on the inside in your blood work, it doesn't matter. I mean, right. And I think that's why it's so important to stay away from vanity goals as much as you possibly can, because I think those are even more detrimental than having strength goals.
Yeah, well, I'm in a little bit of a bodybuilding diet
Well,
myself right now, so I might need to take that advice to heart.
nah, I mean,
Um,
you're a freak though. I mean, that's the one thing is like people would kill to look like what you like right now. I mean,
yeah.
how many guys are 6'7" and 330 pounds and fucking jacked? You know what I mean? I mean,
Yeah, well,
I would have loved to have been that too. I just was always very explosively strong with barbells, and I always struggled to be super lean. But nobody in my family ever carried a ton of muscle, so it took me a lot of work.
well, Matt, I would have loved to have benched 600 raw and squatted 900 in competition as well. So
Hey,
I
when
think
you hit it big, you come train with me for a fucking year, and I will get you to bench 600 raw.
yes, sir. Well, Matt, man, I appreciate your time. I'll go ahead and wrap this thing up. In the meantime, where can people find you at?
Winningstrength.com is the website, WENNING. If you want to follow the workouts that we do on Patreon, like the plyometrics you're talking about, following lengthy off seasons and peak phases and all that, come on to Patreon. That's exactly what we do. I post exactly what I do online, and it's very affordable. And then for even more affordability, we run a Train Heroic app, both conjugate, tactical, and then we're starting a beginner powerlifting. It's not ready yet, and a field sports. So football, soccer, and it's not going to be anything that's like made for ultra advanced people. It's kind of like, hey, I got a 15-year-old that's wanting to play soccer. What should they do for strength training? Because I find that even today, there's so few of good strength coaches at that level that they're better off trying to follow this app and get as good as they can on that particular stuff. So we have that. Instagram's Winning Strong. Facebook, I'm on there, but I think my friends list is max, but I can still get on my business page.
Got it. Well, guys, please go check out Matt Wenning, Wenning Strength. He is just an incredible resource in a number of different realms. And then, guys, of course, you can find me, hammerchiselperformance.com, all my coaching services, ebooks, programs. I've got a Train Heroic as well. And then I encourage you to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Episodes of the podcast dropping and putting more content out there every week. But anyway, guys, we'll catch you on the next episode coming out every Tuesday. And Matt, appreciate you coming on, man.